In the summer of 1940, the streets of Paris fell silent under the heavy boots of the Wehrmacht. France had capitulated in just 6 weeks, and the tricolor was replaced by swastikas draped over the Hôtel de Ville. While the world watched the collapse of Europe's greatest capital, deep inside the corridors of the British Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, an urgent directive was being drafted. London could not afford to lose its eyes and ears in France. A covert network had to be built, one that would outlive occupation and survive beneath it. Thus began the first outlines of what would later be codenamed Operation Centaur. The idea was audacious. Instead of fighting the Nazis on the surface, MI6 would go underground, literally. Paris, a city built over centuries of stone quarries and forgotten catacombs, held nearly 200 miles of tunnel below its surface. These caverns, long sealed off from the public, would become the arteries of a hidden British intelligence network operating in the very heart of Nazi-occupied Europe. The mission: gather intelligence on German troop movements, rail lines, and communications, then relay it to London through secret transmitters buried beneath the streets. At the center of this mission stood Major Harold Atwood, a reserved yet calculating officer from MI6's Section D, the branch responsible for sabotage and irregular warfare. Atwood had served in Spain during the Civil War, where he'd learned the value of silence, patience, and deception. When he landed in southern France in September 1940 under false papers as Henri Dufresne, he carried no weapon, only a miniature transmitter, a handful of French francs, and a promise from London: hold until contact is restored. The struggle for survival in Nazi-occupied Paris was immediate. The Gestapo established their headquarters at 84 Avenue Foch, within earshot of the Eiffel Tower. They monitored telegraph offices, censored mail, and arrested anyone with suspected ties to resistance. To communicate, Atwood relied on an intricate web of contacts: railway workers, postal clerks, and university students, all sworn to secrecy under the guise of the Mouvement Ouvrier National, a fictitious labor organization created as a cover. By November, Atwood's first messages were reaching London via coded Morse transmissions hidden within civilian radio frequencies. One such message, intercepted by British WI service operators in Bletchley Park, read simply: cargo east of Gare du Nord, 2200 hours, destination unknown. This seemingly trivial report provided the first clue to a new German supply corridor running from Paris to the Channel coast, critical for the planned invasion of Britain. Yet, operating below the surface of the city came with its own perils. The tunnels of Paris were cold, damp, and labyrinthine. Entire sections were uncharted, others had collapsed decades earlier. The agents often moved in complete darkness, guided only by wax candles and chalk markings along the stone walls. During one operation, a French telegraphist named Émile Laurent recounted in his diary, "The silence down there is unbearable. Every drip of water feels like a shout. We breathe, but the city above us doesn't know we exist." As weeks turned into months, the network began to grow bolder. A hidden chamber beneath the old Odeon metro station became their primary relay site, disguised as a maintenance depot. Wires were concealed inside gas pipes, and the power source, a modified bicycle generator, was hidden behind false brickwork. The ingenuity was remarkable, but so was the risk. German engineers occasionally conducted inspections of the underground lines, and a single misplaced footprint could have led to mass arrests. By early 1941, Operation Centaur had expanded to over 20 operatives and several auxiliary contacts across the city. MI6 analysts in London were astonished by the consistency of the reports coming from Network C, as it was coded in their files. Yet Atwood knew that every transmission increased the odds of detection. German radio detection units, the Funkabwehr, were sweeping the airwaves, triangulating rogue signals with ruthless precision. Still, the network pressed on. They transmitted data about Luftwaffe storage depots, Gestapo personnel movements, and later, most crucially, German attempts to transport captured Allied scientists through Paris. The information saved lives and foiled operations, but it also placed a target squarely on Atwood's back. In March 1941, a chilling development occurred. An intercepted German memo referred to unidentified transmissions in the Paris Central District, suspected British origin. The Gestapo had noticed. MI6 ordered Atwood to lie low, but he refused, replying with a terse encrypted message, "We are already underground." This was not defiance. It was conviction. The British command in London understood that what was forming beneath Paris was more than an intelligence network. It was a symbol of endurance under occupation, a silent resistance working in the shadows of empire and enemy alike. As the year drew to a close, the network's existence remained unknown to most of the city's inhabitants. To the Germans, the underground remained a place of myth and rumor. To MI6, it was a lifeline, a thread connecting occupied France to the free world beyond the Channel. But for Major Atwood and his operatives, the catacombs were more than a hiding place. They were a tomb waiting to be sealed. The deeper they went, the closer they came to the edge of discovery, and to a mystery that would one day vanish entirely beneath the streets of Paris. And so, beneath the quiet city, MI6's hidden network breathed in darkness, its pulse faint but defiant. Its existence, unknown to all but a few, was about to face its first true test. In the winter of 1941, the tunnels beneath Paris had taken on a life of their own. The sounds of distant trains above, the rumble of German trucks, and the faint echo of dripping limestone formed the backdrop for one of MI6's most secret operations. Major Harold Atwood, still under his alias Henri Dufresne, presided over a makeshift headquarters hidden behind a false wall near the catacombs under Montparnasse. There, the faint hum of a short-wave transmitter connected occupied Paris to London, a fragile thread of hope stretching across the English Channel. The human struggle behind this network was immense. Every signal sent risked the lives of dozens. French collaborators were everywhere. One misplaced word could mean interrogation at 84 Avenue Foch or execution at Montvalérien. Yet the British network grew, absorbing members of the embryonic French resistance. Atwood's most trusted aide was Juliette Morel, a radio operator and former Sorbonne student fluent in both German and English. Her knowledge of city infrastructure allowed them to rewire old telephone lines into communication relays, each disguised as routine maintenance circuits. By February 1942, MI6's Operation Centaur had expanded far beyond its original design. Atwood coordinated with the Bureau Central de Renseignements et d'Action, BCRA, General de Gaulle's intelligence service in exile, linking London's plans with underground Parisian cells. Their objectives were clear: gather intelligence on German troop deployments, monitor the use of French factories for weapons production, and track Gestapo informant networks. But in practice, it was chaos. The Gestapo's Funkabwehr units, the German radio counterintelligence, had begun sweeping neighborhoods, triangulating illegal transmissions. "Every time we keyed up, it was like lighting a match in a darkroom," Juliette later wrote in a coded diary recovered after the war. "We never knew if someone was watching the flame." The physical toll of the work was as punishing as the mental. The tunnels were humid and foul, laced with decades of dust and decay. Rations were scarce, morale even scarcer. To keep the radio operational, Atwood relied on a network of Paris metro engineers who pretended to fix broken power lines while secretly supplying voltage to the hidden transmitters. They scavenged copper wire from abandoned tram lines and batteries from downed Luftwaffe aircraft. Above ground, the Gestapo grew suspicious. Reports of phantom radio sources circulated among occupation authorities. In April 1942, SS officer Karl Oberg, head of German security in France, authorized an intensified hunt for Allied spies. The order, "Find them beneath the streets if you must," marked the first time the Nazis formally acknowledged the existence of an underground network in Paris. Yet Atwood remained undeterred. His latest intelligence, concerning a German convoy transporting experimental equipment through Paris, was deemed vital by London. The report, later verified by reconnaissance photos, revealed the first traces of V-1 flying bomb components being moved toward the Channel coast. This discovery would influence RAF bombing priorities for months to come. But each success deepened the danger. On the night of June 5, 1942, an unplanned inspection of the Odeon metro lines nearly exposed the operation. A German engineer stumbled upon a patch of disturbed earth leading to one of the hidden chambers. The following day, the Gestapo sealed off 2 sectors of the catacombs, stationing guards at all known entrances. Atwood and his team were trapped underground for nearly 48 hours, surviving on condensed milk and stale bread. They emerged only after midnight through a maintenance shaft near the Seine. Still, the network endured. When MI6 received Atwood's brief message, "Network operational. No casualties. Adjusting frequency," the response from London was almost reverent. He had done what few could, maintain communication from the heart of occupied Europe under constant enemy surveillance. But the pressure began to fracture even the most disciplined operatives. The courier network relied on civilian volunteers, students, postal workers, even museum staff from the Louvre, who smuggled microfilm reels inside hollowed-out books and cigarette tins. Each message carried across checkpoints or into the free zone risked discovery. A single compromised courier could unravel the entire system. In late summer, Atwood's deputy, Captain Lionel Reeves, proposed decentralizing transmissions to reduce exposure. Instead of one main transmitter, they would create multiple small relays spread across Paris's vast underground. It was a daring but logical move. Unfortunately, it also increased the number of operatives who knew of the network's existence. That autumn, the Gestapo made their first arrests connected to the London line. 2 railway workers were detained after a neighbor reported unusual late-night activity near a service tunnel. Within weeks, they vanished. No trial, no record. Atwood ordered all radio silence for 10 days, fearing infiltration. By December 1942, the tone of Atwood's reports grew darker. Conditions worsening. Fear growing. Still transmitting, read one dispatch. Those few words reached MI6 just days before the Allied raid on Dieppe. Whether he sensed that the network was tightening around them remains unknown. In the catacombs, candles flickered against damp stone walls as the small team worked in silence. Outside, Paris appeared unchanged, its cafés reopened, its boulevards calm, but beneath that surface lay a war of shadows, waged by a handful of men and women who refused to surrender. And yet, beneath the static of those Morse transmissions, something unsettling began to emerge. Strange anomalies in the signal strength, delayed responses from London, messages that didn't match Atwood's known cipher style. MI6 analysts couldn't explain it then, but those inconsistencies would later take on a darker meaning. For now, though, Major Atwood pressed on, unaware that the next operation would not only test the limits of his network, but would begin its slow unraveling. The couriers were already in motion. 3 of them would never arrive at their destination. By the opening months of 1943, Operation Centaur had matured into one of MI6's most vital yet perilous undertakings on the continent. What had begun as a handful of agents transmitting from the catacombs beneath Paris was now a structured intelligence network spanning across the Seine, with contacts in factories, railway hubs, and even inside Vichy administration offices. Major Harold Atwood and his core operatives had survived 2.5 years under occupation, outwitting Gestapo sweeps and German counterintelligence, but the deeper their reach, the thinner their line of safety became. The war itself was shifting. After the Allied success in North Africa and growing momentum on the Eastern Front, London demanded sharper intelligence about Germany's secret weapons programs. The term Vergeltungswaffe, revenge weapon, had begun circulating through decoded German communications, referring to advanced rocket projects allegedly under development somewhere on the Baltic coast. It was Atwood's task to find proof. Using contacts at the Gare du Nord and the Compagnie de Chemins de Fer du Nord, the network intercepted freight manifests that hinted at unusual rail traffic. Heavy cargo shipments labeled as machine components, departing from Paris and bound for Peenemünde on the German Baltic. Juliette Morel, still operating as the primary code officer, deciphered the details and realized what they meant. The Germans were moving experimental weapon parts through Paris, right under their feet. In late February 1943, Atwood drafted a microfilm report detailing the route and timing of these shipments. It was an extraordinary find, evidence that the V-weapon program was real, and that Paris was serving as a logistical relay for Hitler's newest arsenal. The courier assigned to deliver the report was a young engineer named Claude Renard, operating under the alias Marcel. His route was perilous, south through Dijon, across occupied Lyon, and into neutral Switzerland, where British handlers could retrieve the film. Renard never made it. Somewhere near the town of Macon, his train was stopped by German military police. Witnesses later recalled a quiet search of several compartments, followed by the removal of 2 passengers who were never seen again. Days later, German propaganda announced the arrest of enemy agents carrying subversive documents. MI6 intercepted the message and froze all further courier movement. Atwood's next report to London read simply, "Courier missing. Assume breach." The disappearance shook the network. In early March, 2 additional couriers, Simone Leduc and Pierre Marchal, vanished along similar routes, both carrying fragments of coded intelligence. Whether they were caught by coincidence or betrayal was impossible to tell. Atwood's paranoia deepened. He began rotating code keys every 48 hours and restricting operational knowledge to compartments of 2 or 3. The network's once steady rhythm faltered under the weight of suspicion. A surviving document from MI6 archives, dated March 19, 1943, captures London's unease, Centaur transmissions increasingly erratic. Network integrity uncertain. Advise immediate contact freeze pending verification. But for Atwood, halting operations meant losing months of progress, and perhaps the war's most crucial discovery. Against orders, he persisted. In a chilling diary entry recovered years later, a French operative described the growing sense of dread below the city. "We feel them closing in. Each time the transmitter hums, I imagine the German antennas turning toward us like wolves catching a scent." The Gestapo had indeed intensified their hunt. Under Operation Chatinetz, the Shadow Net, they aimed to dismantle every Allied cell operating in occupied France. By April, they had arrested more than 100 resistance members across Paris, many of whom were tortured for information about hidden radios and foreign agents. Interrogation records later declassified reveal repeated references to an Englishman beneath the city, but no one could pinpoint his location. Atwood's response was to go deeper, literally. The team relocated their operations to a section of the catacombs beneath the 14th arrondissement, accessible only through a disused well shaft behind an old bakery. It was there, by candlelight and in near constant fear of discovery, that Juliet transmitted what would become their final confirmed report to MI6. The message outlined not only the continued movement of V weapon parts, but also a strange shipment marked with the insignia of the organization tote, destined for a facility near Chartres. The implications were enormous. The Germans were constructing secret launch infrastructure across northern France. London received the message in fragments, distorted by atmospheric interference. Then, silence. For 6 weeks, no further signals came from Network C. Intercept logs show repeated British attempts to raise Atwood's call sign, Centaur 1, but only static replied. The assumption within MI6 was grim. The network had been compromised, its operatives captured or killed. Bletchley Park marked the channel inactive. Yet, in June 1943, a faint Morse burst reached one of the WWII service listening posts in southern England. The message, though broken and nearly unreadable, contained 3 chilling words, "Still beneath, watching." Whether it truly came from Atwood or from someone, or something, using his call sign remains one of MI6's great wartime mysteries. The coordinates embedded in the message pointed to a section of Paris's underground not found on any city maps, later sealed off by the Germans after unexplained collapses. To this day, historians cannot confirm what happened in those lost weeks. The British archives hold no death record for Major Harold Atwood. No bodies were recovered. Only fragments of burned code sheets and a rusted radio coil were ever found in what remained of his subterranean post. For London, the loss was devastating. For the Germans, it was an invisible victory, one they may never have realized they achieved. And as the war dragged into its bloodiest phase, whispers of the vanished English ghosts of Paris began to circulate among the city's resistance. Some said the network had gone silent forever. Others believed it still listened from below. Either way, the tunnels beneath Paris were no longer a refuge. They had become a graveyard of secrets, and the beginning of a legend MI6 would never publicly acknowledge. By the summer of 1943, the Gestapo's tightening grip on occupied Paris had transformed the city into a labyrinth of fear. The cafés, once filled with murmured defiance, now echoed with the footsteps of informants. The walls had ears, the radios had eyes, and every whisper carried the risk of betrayal. Somewhere beneath this tightening noose, Major Harold Atwood's MI6 network was fighting for its last breath. In May, SS Brigadefuhrer Karl Oberg, chief of German security in France, launched Operation Schattenetz, the Shadow Net. Its objective was singular: to destroy the British and French espionage apparatus that had burrowed under Paris like a cancer. Dozens of Gestapo agents were assigned to the case, assisted by German engineers familiar with the city's underground utilities. Patrols began inspecting disused metro tunnels, sewers, and maintenance shafts, searching for the elusive transmitters that had haunted German communications since 1941. Meanwhile, the surviving members of Atwood's network, no more than 6 by this point, moved constantly between hideouts. The section near Montparnasse, once their stronghold, had been compromised. Juliette Morel, the brilliant code operator and one of the few who still believed Atwood might be alive, relocated the transmitter to a new site beneath the disused Arsenal metro station. Supplies were scarce, morale even scarcer. For food, they relied on sympathetic railway workers who left packages at prearranged dead drops inside service tunnels. Juliette's journal, recovered decades later by French historians, captures the claustrophobic terror of those final months. The air is heavy, damp, unbreathable. Sometimes we hear the boots above us. Sometimes the water drips like a clock counting down. Atwood's last order before the silence was clear: keep transmitting, no matter what. But by August 1943, the Gestapo's net had drawn dangerously close. Radio detection trucks combed the streets near the Seine, their operators scanning for any rogue frequency. On the 12th of August, an intercepted signal, weak but traceable, led them to the vicinity of the Latin Quarter. The Germans sealed off the area, deploying engineers to access a subterranean maintenance tunnel. It was here, according to post-war interrogation transcripts, that they stumbled upon the first physical trace of MI6's presence: a damaged antenna cable hidden inside a hollowed gas pipe. For 2 days, they searched the surrounding tunnels with dogs and listening equipment. What they found next remains one of the most chilling discoveries of the Paris occupation: a small chamber lined with scorched stone, a broken transmitter, and the charred remains of code sheets scattered across the floor. Among the debris lay a British officer's insignia, major's rank, bearing the faint etching, H. Atwood. The Gestapo photographed everything. The report filed to Berlin read: suspected British espionage center, abandoned. Evidence of self-destruction before capture. No personnel located. The agents called it Das Grab unter Paris, the grave beneath Paris. But not everyone believed the chamber was empty when they arrived. One German engineer later told Allied interrogators in 1945 that faint voices had been heard through the ventilation shafts, a man and a woman speaking English, before the chamber was breached. No record corroborates his claim. The Gestapo sealed the section permanently with concrete, declaring it unstable. For MI6, the discovery was bittersweet. In London, Atwood's superior, Colonel Robert Winfield, received fragments of German communications confirming the find. Network compromised. Recommend full blackout, read the internal memo. The London Signals section archived the Centaur file with a single word stamped in red ink: lost. Yet, the mystery deepened further when, weeks later, faint transmissions began to reappear. Brief, intermittent bursts on Centaur's old frequency. Centaur, too, was the identifier. The signal contained coded strings that partially matched Atwood's cipher, but the phrasing was unlike his. One message, logged by the Y service at Fort Bridgewoods on October 3, 1943, simply said, "Not all gone. Still below." Was it a surviving member of the team? A German ploy? MI6 analysts debated the question for months. The signals came at irregular intervals, sometimes from Paris, sometimes farther south, before fading entirely in early 1944. No confirmation was ever achieved, but the possibility of survivors, hidden somewhere beneath occupied Paris, haunted British intelligence for the remainder of the war. Meanwhile, the Gestapo continued their purge. The collapse of the Atwood network did not end their paranoia, it intensified it. Dozens of innocent Parisians were arrested on suspicion of aiding British spies. Resistance leaders later testified that the Germans feared the tunnels themselves were alive, that somewhere below, unseen, the British were still listening. Juliette Morel's fate remains among the operation's most haunting mysteries. She disappeared in October 1943, her last known act to send a short transmission containing the word Liberté. No trace of her or her equipment was ever found. Some accounts claim she escaped to the free zone. Others insist she perished sealing the last chamber from the inside to prevent German access. By year's end, Operation Centaur had ceased to exist as a functioning network. But its legend persisted, an MI6 ghost story told among Allied agents across Europe. Even Colonel Winfield, when questioned after the war, admitted, "We don't know where Atwood died. But we do know this: he kept Paris talking when silence was fatal." The tunnels were silent now, their secrets entombed beneath layers of stone and fear. Yet even in that silence, the faintest echo of resistance remained. And above ground, far from those dark passages, the Allies were preparing for the greatest invasion in history. The question in London lingered: if any of the Centaur networks still lived, would they answer when the time came to rise again? By the dawn of 1944, the war had shifted decisively in the Allies' favor. The German occupation of France, once secure, was beginning to fracture under the weight of attrition, sabotage, and aerial bombardment. From London, preparations for Operation Overlord, the long-awaited invasion of Europe, were reaching a fever pitch. Yet amid the planning rooms of MI6 and the Special Operations Executive, an old question returned to haunt British intelligence. What remained of the hidden network beneath Paris? Centaur had been marked as lost the previous year, its operatives presumed dead. But in March 1944, as Allied bombers began striking transport hubs across northern France, radio technicians in Bletchley Park intercepted something unexpected. Brief Morse fragments, weak and fading, broadcast on one of Centaur's long-disused frequencies. The signals came from the Paris region, using code phrases only known to Section D. The content was incomplete, but one fragment stood out: rails, clear south, enemy shifting east. For London, it was impossible. The Centaur codes had not been in circulation for months. And yet, the encryption style, slightly altered but still traceable to Atwood's hand, was unmistakable. Within hours, MI6 analysts began a cautious process of verification, comparing the burst transmissions with pre-war cipher logs. The pattern was deliberate, the timing suggestive. Someone, or something, was still transmitting from beneath Nazi-occupied Paris. At that same moment, in the city itself, life teetered between defiance and despair. The Gestapo had turned more violent, arresting hundreds in retaliation for resistance attacks. Entire neighborhoods lived in silence, their residents vanishing in the night. The catacombs remained sealed to most, though rumors persisted among railway workers that faint clicking sounds, like Morse code, could still be heard through old ventilation grates. Then came April 9, 1944. A WWII service station in southern England received a full-length transmission under the Centaur call sign. The message was fragmentary but chilling: German positions, west of Seine, artillery concealed near Ivry, awaiting order, liberate soon. When decoded, the intelligence corresponded precisely with later verified German troop deployments defending the southern approaches to Paris. Whoever sent that message had access to frontline information weeks before D-Day. In London, Colonel Robert Winfield, who had overseen Centaur since 1940, ordered the signals section to maintain silent monitoring. "No replies," he wrote in his directive. "We observe only." The risk of exposing the sender was too high. Whether Atwood himself had survived or the remnants of his team were operating autonomously remained an open question. Meanwhile, on the ground in Paris, the resistance was reawakening. As Allied bombings intensified, French partisans began sabotaging rail lines, ambushing German convoys, and relaying coded reports to London. One resistance leader, Henri Frager of the Réseau Gilbert, later recalled hearing whispers of English ghosts still transmitting from the sewers. "They called them Les Ombres," he wrote in his post-war memoir. "No one had ever seen them, but their messages foretold the battles to come." In June, just after the D-Day landings in Normandy, Another burst transmission reached the WWII service. It was short, erratic, and sent in old Centaur code. The city waits. Hold fast. They retreat. Within hours, German communication lines in Paris began reporting disarray, conflicting orders, missing units, and transport breakdowns. Whether the Centaur transmission contributed to that chaos or merely coincided with it remains unclear, but to MI6, the timing was remarkable. Someone inside occupied Paris was feeding intelligence that mirrored the Allied advance. And then, as quickly as it had returned, the network went silent again. Historians now know that in late July 1944, the Gestapo conducted one of its final raids against suspected British spies in the capital. German archives refer to a subterranean relay station discovered near the Seine, where unidentified radio apparatus had been hidden inside an abandoned sewer pump room. Inside, the Germans found nothing but a broken transmitter, 3 empty food tins, and the remnants of an RAF codebook, pages soaked in oil to prevent legibility. Nearby, scratched into the damp brick wall, was a single phrase in English, "Still below." As the Allies pushed toward Paris in August, British intelligence continued to receive sporadic bursts of static, faint signals, never long enough to decode. To the analysts at Bletchley, it felt less like communication and more like a heartbeat, irregular, weakening, but undeniably alive. When the French resistance finally rose up on August 19, 1944, and the city exploded in rebellion, some claimed to have heard British voices over shortwave bands, urging Parisians to hold the bridges and delay retreat. No recording survives to confirm this. But after liberation, when Allied units entered Paris, a team from the Special Air Service and British Signals Corps descended into the old catacombs, searching for evidence of Centaur. They found it, or part of it. Beneath the Arsenal metro station, just as Juliette Morel's notes had described, lay a sealed passage reinforced with wartime concrete. Breaking through, the soldiers discovered corroded radio parts, a few personal items, and a steel canister stamped with the MI6 crest. Inside were fragments of microfilm, too damaged to read, and a handwritten note in English. "If this is found, know that we tried. For England. For France. H.A." The authenticity of the note has never been conclusively verified, but its existence, now preserved in Britain's National Archives, continues to fuel debate among historians. Did Atwood truly survive long enough to witness the liberation of Paris? Or had someone else, inspired by his legend, kept the signal alive in his stead? In the weeks following Paris's liberation, MI6 logged one final transmission under Centaur's call sign. It was short, only 6 words, clear and steady despite the static. "Mission complete. The city is free." Then silence. Permanent, this time. Even now, in the tunnels beneath Paris, restorers occasionally uncover fragments of wire, scorched battery casings, and carved initials dated 1944. Most dismiss them as remnants of the resistance. But for a few historians, they are echoes, evidence of a network that refused to die, a final whisper from MI6's hidden war beneath the city. And though the war above was turning toward victory, the fate of Harold Atwood, and those who followed him into the dark, remained unanswered. Their story was almost over, but one final revelation still waited beneath the rubble of a liberated Paris. August 1944. The liberation of Paris was more than a military victory, it was a resurrection. The city had endured 4 years of occupation, humiliation, and silence. When the French tricolor rose again over the Hôtel de Ville, crowds filled the streets, shouting, crying, embracing soldiers they had never met. Yet, as tanks rolled along the boulevards and church bells rang for the first time in years, another world, silent and unseen, remained buried beneath their feet. For the Allied command, victory in Paris was swift but chaotic. The 2nd French Armored Division under General Leclerc and the U.S. 4th Infantry had entered the city from opposite directions, converging on the center as German resistance crumbled. Amid the jubilation, teams from MI6 and the Special Operations Executive were dispatched to secure former Gestapo offices and investigate lingering intelligence concerns. One of those concerns carried a name that many believed long forgotten: Operation Centaur. MI6's London office had been receiving fragmented reports from the field, rumors of hidden transmitters discovered in the catacombs, of resistance fighters guided by mysterious English orders in the final days before liberation. Colonel Robert Winfield, the same officer who had authorized Centaur 4 years earlier, sent a simple telegram to the Paris Field Unit: investigate underground sectors. Locate remnants of Centaur network. Secure all documents for transfer to London. Led by Captain Edward Havers, a communications specialist attached to the 79th Signals Regiment, the search began on August 30th. Guided by resistance contacts, the team entered a maintenance tunnel beneath the Arsenal metro station, the same sector once linked to Atwood's operations. The air was thick with mildew and dust. The echo of dripping water accompanied every step. The deeper they went, the more the temperature dropped, until they reached a sealed concrete wall marked with German script: Betreten verboten, Einsturzgefahr. Entry forbidden, risk of collapse. Behind it, using demolition charges, they uncovered a chamber that hadn't seen light in over a year. Inside were the remains of what had once been a clandestine radio post. A rusted transmitter sat on a makeshift table, its wires fused from heat. Nearby, an MI6 field codebook, its cover burned but legible, lay beside a steel case stamped Section D, property of HMG. When Havers forced it open, he found reels of undeveloped microfilm, personal effects, and a half-destroyed logbook. The first page read simply, Major H. Atwood, Command, Centaur Network, Paris Sector. The final entry, dated July 28, 1944, read, Transmission to London successful. Evacuation imminent. Juliet safe. Signal will continue. If not me, then us. Those words were the last confirmation of life from anyone associated with the operation. The chamber bore other signs of human presence. Food tins labeled from 1943, a British-made compass, and the remnants of a uniform jacket with a faded insignia. Yet, no bodies were found. Only a single handprint on the far wall, preserved in soot, as if someone had pressed it there moments before sealing the chamber. The discovery was quietly reported to MI6 headquarters. Colonel Winfield classified the materials immediately, ordering them shipped to London under diplomatic guard. Officially, the operation did not exist. Even within British intelligence circles, it was filed as a non-attributable field action. Only years later, through declassified fragments, did historians piece together the extent of what Centaur had achieved. Among the recovered microfilm were reconnaissance sketches of German rail traffic, coded lists of collaborators, and early warnings of V-weapon construction routes. These documents, analysts later concluded, had likely influenced Allied bombing operations in northern France throughout 1943. The data was precise, too precise to have come from rumor or guesswork. Whoever had gathered it had operated within the very heart of occupied Paris, undetected for years. And yet, the mystery of Atwood's disappearance remained unresolved. No death certificate, no witness testimony, no confirmed sighting. Some speculated that he escaped through the southern tunnels and joined retreating resistance units near Fontainebleau. Others suggested a darker fate, that he was captured and executed in secrecy by the Gestapo before liberation. The official MI6 record lists him simply as missing, presumed deceased. Paris, 1944. But in 1956, a strange addendum appeared in the file. During the post-war restoration of the Paris sewers, French workers uncovered a sealed chamber near the Isle St. Louis, less than a kilometer from Atwood's last known location. Inside were fragments of British equipment, a rusted Enigma rotor, and a small tin box. Within it lay a strip of paper, faded but legible, bearing a single line of typed text. Centaur watches still. Whether it was genuine or an elaborate wartime hoax, no one could say. The item was sent to London, and then, like so many other secrets of the war, vanished into the archives. Today, the story of MI6's hidden network beneath Nazi-occupied Paris remains one of the lesser-known chapters of the intelligence war. No medals were awarded. No public recognition followed. The catacombs, now sealed and mapped for safety, hold little trace of the lives once risked there. And yet, for those who have studied the surviving records, the operation stands as a testament to endurance, to the men and women who fought a war not in the skies or on the beaches, but in silence, darkness, and fear. As historians walk those tunnels today, they often report a curious phenomenon: faint metallic clicks echoing in the distance. Nothing supernatural, just the slow rhythm of condensation falling from iron pipes. But for those who know the story, it's impossible not to imagine Morse code echoing across time. A final message, perhaps, from a network that refused to die. Centaur watches still.